So this Saturday, Jan Blachowicz gets another shot at the UFC light heavyweight championship against Makhachev Ankalaev. Hopefully I'm getting that right. And to be honest, I'm more hyped about this fight than the other UFC light heavyweight championships post John Jones, because with guys like Glover Teixeira and Jan Blachowicz, it's good and everything, but again, these guys are on the, we'll say, second half of their career, and they're good, but there's no way that you can compare these two guys to a guy like John Jones. Whenever they won their championships, you didn't feel like a Glover Teixeira or a Jan Blachowicz were really going to be dominant in the next decade of the UFC. A guy like Yuri Prochazka, whenever he did win the UFC championship, he did have promise on a certain level. However, certain parts of his game, like his wrestling, like his ground game, definitely were exposed on a certain level. However, with Makhachev Ankalaev, he is someone who I believe could become the champion at 205 pounds and stay champion for a long, long time. So whenever I first saw Ankalaev, I saw the beard, I saw that he was from Russia, and immediately I think Khabib. I immediately think Fedor. I immediately think Islam Makhachev. And immediately I think of Sambo, wrestling, all that stuff whenever you think of that region of the world. However, whenever I was watching his fighting style, it reminded me more of a striker than a wrestler. Now, I have seen training footage, I've seen most of his fights, and he does have an excellent wrestling base, but he really never uses it, and he really just stands up and strikes with guys, and his striking is so clean that he doesn't even need to use his wrestling. Which, again, it's very scary because it's almost like you have a guy like, let's say, a Khabib or an Islam, but then they elect to stand up because they're striking so good. And it's like whenever your striking is on that level and your wrestling is on that level, but you don't even need to wrestle because you're striking so good, I mean, like, where do you go at that point if you're any of the other 205 pounders? Now, on the other hand, Jan Blachowicz is super underrated. People love him, people love his kindness, his cool and calm demeanor and all that kind of stuff. However, they underrate him a lot. With Israel Adesanya, sure, he kind of won, with his wrestling because he was so much bigger. I mean, he's cutting weight to get down to 205 pounds. Izzy was walking around at maybe like 190, something like that. However, whenever you go back and watch that fight, Jan was right there with, maybe not winning technically, but he was right there with Israel Adesanya, one of the greatest strikers in UFC history, and he was right there with him. So at this point, I would certainly say that Ankalaev has never faced a striker as good as Jan Blachowicz, and Jan Blachowicz does have very good wrestling as well. Now, whenever it comes to the UFC absolutely wants Ankalaev to win this fight. Jan Blachowicz, he's great, he's good, all that stuff. He's a company man, he'll fight multiple times, but he is getting older. Ankalaev is only 30 years old while Jan Blachowicz is about to turn 40. So whenever you're looking about the future of the UFC and where they want the company to go, they absolutely want Ankalaev to win this fight. Now, I'm actually kind of shocked that they had the Glover Teixeira Jan Blachowicz rematch. That kind of blows my mind because it's not a great business plan, I guess you could say long term. So again, in my opinion, I think the UFC absolutely want Ankalaev to win this fight. I have Makhachev Ankalaev winning by third round KO. Now on paper, this fight card doesn't look like it's super stacked, but there's some awesome matchups, and there's also Paddy Pimblett fighting Jared Gordon, Darren Till's fighting on the card, which gosh does he need a win. Bryce Mitchell is opening up the main card. So again, not a ton of huge names, especially for a pay-per-view, but honestly I think it's still going to be a great fight card.